Hello everybody and welcome back to INTR 101. For today we're going to be talking about studying. So we'll go over some basic study skills, some different ways to prepare to study, and how to study more effectively. And if you're like me, when you sit down to study, sometimes you have no clue what exactly it is that you're going to start doing or how you're going to spend that time. So I'm going to start today with a quick question, and I want you all to think about when and how do you start preparing for an exam? So sometimes I hear students tell me like, oh, the golden rule 3 days beforehand. And that may work for some classes, but it's not going to work for all of them. So when we consider when we start studying for a big exam or anything like that, we need to really take into consideration what the class is like for us, how challenging it is, and then let that tell us realistically how much time we need to spend studying. So when it comes time to prepare for an exam, the number one thing you want to do is start early. And to kind of do that, you can build and stick to a study schedule. You can action plan that study plan. And for an example of that, you can look back at our time management lecture. And then big thing, you want to avoid cramming, because when we cram for an exam, we don't actually retain a lot of that material. And if you're cramming for like a mid-semester exam and then it's a cumulative final, you may not retain all of that information. So you want your studying to really stick with you. So first, we're going to find the time and the place to study. So take a look at your schedule, figure out where it is that you actually have some time, and utilize small gaps, because, you know, like 30 minutes of doing some quick review could really help in the long run. Next, consider when you actually do your best studying. So think about when you're most productive or when you feel most motivated, and try and put your study time in those areas. How long should we study for? Well, my general rule of thumb is 1 to 1.5 hours, just because after that amount of time, it gets really hard to maintain focus and to retain information. And then think about where are some good places to study. It's important to find a space for yourself that you can dedicate to studying. And right now, where some of the classes might be online, it may be just kind of segregating a space in your room and dedicating that as your study space, or still utilizing the library or a computer lab on campus. And then when it comes to that space, the number one thing you want to remember is to minimize distractions, because especially if we're studying for a class that we don't enjoy, it's really easy to get distracted by something and end up kind of procrastinating. So here's an example schedule that has some studying built right in. And the thing that I really like about this schedule is that it includes some study breaks built in. So, you know, this person, it has some 1.5-hour blocks with a little break in between them. And then the other thing that I really, really love about this schedule is that this person included drop-in tutoring hours for their class, as well as SI Pass for their class. So they're incorporating all of those helpful resources into their schedule and planning ahead with them. And that can help ensure that they actually utilize those resources. And it reduces the amount of time that they have to study on their own and come up with their own study materials. So you figured it out, you looked at your schedule, you found some blocks of time. Why don't you just start studying? Like, what's keeping you from that? Procrastination, usually. At least that's what it is for me, and that's what it is for a lot of students. So how do we find ways to kind of avoid that procrastination? Well, one is utilizing our time efficiently and keeping in mind that studying starts in class. So you want to ensure that you're arriving to class early and prepared, and you want to look for those instructor hints, because if you're getting a lot of cues from your instructor about what's important, or they're putting a lot of time and energy into one specific area, you know that that's probably what you want to focus on for your studying. And then you want to use your resources. So thinking of the think tank or the writing center or drop-in tutoring, those sorts of resources on campus can help motivate you and help prevent some procrastination, because you just need to show up and get a little bit of assistance from folks, and they put in some of the harder work of like planning activities and those sorts of things. And then remember your motivation. Maybe that motivation is, I just never want to have to take this class again. That is perfectly fine motivation, and it can really help you get through those more boring or less fun classes. Next, to help avoid procrastination, get organized. Make sure that when you arrive to your space to study that you have everything with you, whether that's books, notes, pencils, anything that you might need. And the reason for that is it's really easy to just say, I guess I can't study because I forgot this one book that maybe isn't critical, but it might be. So kind of prevent that ahead of time and making sure you have everything before you head off to study. Again, minimize distractions. Trust me on this one. Whether it's putting your phone on airplane mode or getting an app that locks you out of other apps so that you can't use them while you're studying, whatever it takes to kind of keep you focused on the material. Next, identify the goal of a work session. So it's really easy to procrastinate if you don't have kind of a goal in mind for your study session. So set one beforehand. It may be, I want to read through this entire chapter and take notes. That's a clear goal, and that way when you complete that, you can be done with that study session. And then with those goals, create an action plan for yourself. Give yourself some structure for your study session. A lot of the times we get distracted and kind of procrastinate when we don't really have any clear direction on what we're supposed to be doing. So give yourself that direction. Now, we've talked about action planning before, but I want you to take a minute and action plan a study plan for yourself. So think of a class that you have an exam coming up in, or maybe a large project due soon. And I want you to develop an action plan that has at least 3 steps, and I want you to include at least one resource to help you while you're studying. And then think about maybe what are some roadblocks that you might run into. Maybe it is procrastination. How are you going to work through that roadblock to ensure that you're feeling confident in the class and in the material? Now, another quick tip, and we've already discussed this in time management, but it's worth going over again, is the Pomodoro technique. So this is a really great way to help prevent procrastination as well. So keep in mind that for the Pomodoro technique, you work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break and go back and forth like that 4 times before taking a longer break. And the reason this can help with procrastination is that it's much easier to convince yourself to work for only 25 minutes than it is to convince yourself to work for an hour. So if you're really struggling with that motivation to stay focused, give this a try and see if it helps out a little bit. Some other ways to get started and to kind of kick off a study session if you're struggling to kind of get the motivation there is look for a really easy way to enter the work. So don't start with taking a really intense and challenging practice test. Start by just rewriting your notes or returning to some material that you feel confident in. Maybe identify some steps in problems that you've worked on and get a feel for that. And then try only holding yourself to 10 minutes of work, and then slowly build up on how much time you're studying. So these are all really nice, easy ways to enter studying and get you in the mindset so that then you can tackle the more challenging aspects of the material that you're trying to work through. Keep in mind that your notes are a study tool and they should be really helpful for you. So when you're studying, try and utilize those as best you can by reviewing and revising them. So return to your notes after class, which keep in mind that starts studying early. Summarize those key points and then fill in any gaps in your notes. And then obviously review and rewrite those notes to kind of solidify those concepts. So one thing that's really great about the summarizing step of this is if you've been summarizing your notes like maybe once a week or so throughout the semester, when it comes time for an exam, you can look at those summaries first and figure out what areas you're really confident in and what areas maybe you need to spend a little more time studying. When it comes to your STEM notes, think back to what we talked about and identify some clear steps in those STEM notes and try and translate the material for yourself. So this process, again, helps solidify those concepts for you. So what you're doing is taking something that's really numerical and translating it into your own words to help better understand it. And this process, again, is a really nice and simple way to start studying. Plus, when you develop these systems and these directions for yourself, when you get to a test, you can reflect back on those steps, and it usually helps you solve problems really similar to it. And like I said, summarize your notes. So give it a try. For a couple of sections of your notes, write 2 to 3 sentence summaries. and then highlight any of the sections that you maybe have questions on and write a list of those questions that you can email to your instructor. What's important is to get those questions answered before, like, the night before an exam. And the reason for that is that you're filling in the gaps, right? So you can fill in the gaps in your notes in a lot of different ways. So one is asking your professor or your TA, but you can also check out drop-in tutoring, SI Pass, the Writing Center, or the Think Tank to get more help in filling in some of those missing pieces. So we've talked a lot about good, gentle ways to start studying, things that help you ease into the process. But really great studying needs to be active. So what is active studying? Well, when we think about learning, it can kind of be broken into two general sections, and that's passive learning and active learning. Now, one isn't necessarily better than the other, but one helps kind of solidify concepts and one helps review concepts. So our passive learning is things like reading, listening, looking, just kind of observing the material. So that's like rereading our notes or re-listening to lectures. And it's really great to help get all of those concepts back in your brain and thinking about them. But when you actually want to really solidify that material and make those connections in all of the different classes that you're taking, you want to shift towards active learning. So that's speaking, saying, and doing. What that means is it's really engaging with the material. So if we think about writing out your steps in your own words for STEM classes, that's an active learning technique. It really forces you to think through the material and practice writing it out and doing it in your own terms. And we'll go over a couple other active learning techniques now. So, like I said, active studying helps build connections in the material. It connects the topics covered, but more importantly, it helps you find a way to make the information stick with you. So you also can incorporate a lot of different things when you're trying to study. Some folks believe in like listening to the same type of music while studying a certain subject or chewing one flavor of gum while taking practice tests. Like, these are all kind of multifaceted techniques to build those connections for yourself. And then you can think about these connections when you're taking the test later. So when it comes to actual study techniques, one of the most common ones is finding a memory device. So this could be an acronym like FOIL when it comes to multiplying binomials, or an acrostic, which is kind of a phrase or sentence to remember. So King Phil came over for the gene special is a way to remember the like structure of identifying living organisms. Or another way or another memory device is connecting material to an outside source. So that kind of goes along with that whole listening to a certain type of music or chewing a flavor of gum, or just some other external thing. Like, I always connect cinnamon rolls with electrodynamics because when I was studying for a really big exam for that class, I was eating cinnamon rolls during that time as well. Next, when we're studying, we're preparing for the exam. And what's really important when it comes to preparing for your exam is you want to know thy enemy. And what I mean by that is you want to understand the exam format and then practice in a way that follows that format. So if you know that you have a 50-question multiple choice exam for one of your classes, make a practice test with 50 multiple choice questions. If you know it's going to be taken in an hour without any notes, set a timer and put your notebook away. And then practice solving those exam questions in that format. And what that does is it develops the habit and it develops your skills. Additionally, if you have some testing anxiety, if you're a little concerned, or if tests really make you anxious, practicing the format ahead of time and getting yourself really used to that format can help reduce that anxiety just a little bit for yourself. Another great thing is if you practice tests without your notes, you have a better understanding of where exactly you're sitting with that material. So if you're only practicing problems with your notes out, you're never actually testing yourself on how well you remember everything. So trying to do it without that can help. The big thing when it comes to active learning and active studying is that you want to practice your answers. And whether that's talking out loud, making a graph, writing, anything like that, you want to do something that really engages the material in a meaningful way for yourself. Another thing is connect with other folks in the class. So meet with people to come up with sample questions for your practice tests. And this does a lot of really great things. One, it connects you with other people in your class. But two, when we write practice problems for ourselves, we tend to write ones that we know we can answer. So if you get some practice problems from other people, it's more likely that you'll have more challenging problems for yourself to work through. And that's really good because it can test your knowledge a bit better. Additionally, let's say you have a group of 5 people, maybe you each only need to write 10 questions to make that practice exam of 50 problems versus you having to write all 50 by yourself. So it helps lighten the load as well. And all of this is still possible even if you're taking online classes. You can either ask the instructor to, see if anyone wants to submit some practice problems, or you could message people on Zoom to just see if anyone's interested in it, and then trade questions over email and kind of correct each other's questions over a Zoom call. Now, one of my personal favorite ways to study is by giving an elevator pitch. And in the business world, this is like a 30-second talk when you're trying to sell an idea. But in the academic world, this is a 1 to 2 minute speech on a topic that you're studying. And what's important is that you word it in a way that's understandable by anybody. And this can serve as a way to really check your understanding of the material. Plus, hearing things out loud kind of helps you firm up those ideas and make sure that it actually sounds correct and that it's actually what you're trying to say. And the ability to summarize material in a clear and concise way can help you get a sense of how well you actually understand things. So give an elevator pitch to your friend, to your roommate, to your parents, annoy some stranger. Just see if you can get that material out into the world and really help you kind of solidify those concepts for yourself. This is also great if you're in a study group because you can go around and give elevator pitches to each other and correct and ask questions to see if you really understand that material. And then when it comes to studying, again, don't forget to breathe and make some time for yourself. So learn to decline things if you're feeling really stressed about a test and maybe need to spend some more time, but also remember that you're human and that you still need to connect with family or friends. And make sure to treat yourself to a nice meal or Netflix or long walk or anything that you need after a really long study session, because you don't want to burn yourself out before you take the exam. And then if you're feeling really stressed out, make sure to practice some structured breathing and make sleep a priority. So all-nighters are going to happen, and I totally understand that, but especially before a test, make sure that you get some sleep so that you can perform well and that you aren't feeling too burnt out and terrible the next day. So some big takeaways for this: there's no time like the present to start studying. Remember that it's quality over quantity. Maybe you don't need to spend 7 hours a day studying on a test if you do it in a really active and engaging way. And to that end, it's all about active studying if you want to build those connections and really check your understanding. Practice the way that you need to perform so that you can feel more confident on the exam. And then don't forget to take a break when you need one. Alrighty, that's all I have for you all today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.